Everybody needs to strike a pose. I will cover my beardlessness.
Is this a pose?
I don't know. Are you a poser?
Coffee drinking poser. I don't have the hair extensions to pull off Gandalf.
I need.
Well, how else are you going to keep the water out of your eyes when you're riding down the street?
Alright, we are. Maybe that's what the ring,
Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Society. I'm host and founder of the A.A. Tolkien Society, an official smile of the UK Tolkien Society. We're here in Spokane, Washington. We generally meet on the third Saturday of each month at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Time. And in just 2 months, we have Tolkien Moot 15 coming up. You can check out more about that at tolkienmoot.org. And, of course, our website is tolkienscholars.org. And you can catch all of our previous videos on youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. I don't have the other camera working properly for some reason, so we've got a bunch of disembodied voices. I'll have to fiddle around while you guys talk, but go ahead and voice-wise, Brian, introduce yourself.
Is this on?
I gotta add that too. Everything's all screwed up because I've been out of town for 2 months. Everything's... Hang on here, let me get your...
Check. Richard, I noticed you're the only one without a microphone. Jolly pull show for you.
Go ahead and tap your mic there, Brian. Hang on. Try that again, Brian.
Check.
No, that's not the right one.
Hello?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Hang on, one at a time, everybody. All at once, I can't isolate which is which. Okay, Brian, tap yours.
Hello? Tap.
I hear nothing.
Tap.
It's showing up there, but it's not.
Prisoners tapping on the wall.
Somebody maybe dialed it down. So I had a lot of volunteers in here while I've been gone, and it is a mess. Yes. So pardon us while we fix things after a hiatus. Well, they needed to keep things going while I was gone, so, I mean, and Windows loves to just randomly unplug things.
There was a recent
my
update.
kids.
There was a recent update.
Yes, and it hosed everything. It was a huge update, and it hosed everything, and I'm still trying to undo the damage on every computer. Luckily, most of my computers are running Linux, but every Windows computer
Get
is a mess.
Get a hold of...
Brian, go ahead and tap.
Windows 10 LTSB.
I'll share with you. I'm nice like that.
Updates once every 6 months.
I'm just trying to get the last few Windows computers I have left onto Linux or OpenBSD, and I just don't even want to bother with Windows anymore. I haven't wanted to for a long time. Okay, so go ahead and say hello, Brian.
Hello, Brian.
Thank you, George Burns and company. And Richard, let's see if yours is working. Go ahead and tap that mic over your head. Yep.
Tape.
So go ahead and...
It's a missile poison.
Well, go ahead and introduce yourself. Just kind of speak loudly, and one of the other mics should pick you up.
Yes, with your chin tilted towards the ceiling, please.
So I am the most unimportant person here.
Nope.
Here. Wait, did I miss something?
Let's be kind.
Sorry.
Rewind? Sorry.
I get that reference.
So, Richard?
Hollywood video.
I'm Richard Baldwin, and I wandered off on the street, and they let me stay.
I'm
And
Chris.
welcome once again.
Yes.
I'm Chris Cooperstein, paying dues member.
Oh.
Elitist.
Elitist.
Proletariat.
Most of us are members of the Royal Tolkien Society in the United Kingdom.
Royal Tolkien Society.
Well,
I thought it was just the
isn't-
UK Tolkien Society.
Isn't it supposed to be
It's
anything?
the official.
Anything in the UK is just naturally supposed to have royal in front of it.
Technically-
I don't think there's the Royal Communist Party, though.
There's the Republicans.
Let's let the next guy speak up.
And
Hello.
being off camera here, but welcome once again.
Hello, my name is Anthony, and I'm just here for kicks and laughs and for the fun of discussing Tolkien.
Yeah.
My-
Wonderful.
All its Italian favorite authors.
Excellent. You are in good company, so thank you for showing up once again.
Yeah.
So I'll be fiddling with cameras to bring Chris, Richard, and Brian on camera, but we also allow others who don't want to be on camera to be off camera. So yeah, help yourself to any snacks that those are donated by volunteers and such.
To the scale.
So Brian, if you want to go ahead and start with the meeting notes from the previous meeting that Richard and I did back in
It would be my pleasure, Hawk.
Thank you.
You are
That
very
was-
welcome.
That was the June meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so this is from June 15th, 2019. The Aya Tolkien Society of the Inland Northwest met, attending in person the grand total of 2, Hawk and Richard, and
That was our lowest attendance in
our vast,
years.
number of people out there who just were probably listening in at some point. And then we had no meeting in July. So,
Because I was gone on honeymoon.
Yes.
And all that good stuff.
so well, and I was here as well. We just decided we didn't want to do it without you, Hawk. It would have hurt. It would just been
I couldn't make it either.
okay. So Chris couldn't make it either, but so.
Corey couldn't make it either.
Okay, all right. But the meeting for June is as follows. Introductory comments, reading of the notes from May's meeting, comments arising from notes. Okay, the peanut gallery may now be quiet. Hawk clarified the meetup group for Aya Tolkien Society is shut down, but others, such as the Music Jam one, Song of Arda, still going. And he posted our meetings on the RPG meetup, which he keeps on as well. So people
Which
still
has
can
over
find us.
900 people on it.
Yes. So, and
Although I did not get a chance to do it this time.
well, that might have had something to do with the fact that I sent you the notes at 11 o'clock today.
Well, but I can still send a reminder. I missed
That's
one.
totally fine. But hey,
And
we're-
Gilder to blame for it.
we're thankful that Anthony's here today, has been here in the past, and then, of course, also from Meetup. But back to the notes.
HOUS.
Other comments from the notes were that just a reminder that Tolkien Moot 15 moved to October 19th due to other commitments.
Honeymoon.
Looking forward to the second edition of the One Ring RPG system next year. Other comments include Hawks.
Which they were at Gen Con. We
Were
were
they?
at Gen Con.
Did you go over to their table at all?
John did. I was manning the booth most of the time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Google 7 was very present there.
Very good.
Plus, they've now
are
got
you
the
sure you
Warhammer
weren't hawking the
IP
booth?
Oh, yeah, it's
as well
huge.
with Dr. Fudo. What's that?
Are you sure you weren't hawking the booth?
Anyway.
Okay, let's see. Hawkman, that's a superhero, isn't it?
In Flash Gordon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hawkeye is a more relevant.
Well, okay.
Recent.
Well, Hawkeye was in Marvel, but there's a
Moving
Hawkman in DC.
on.
Anyway, there's lots of Hawks, but only one Hawk Robinson. Okay, so the next part here is Hawk's amusing anecdote about the postman asking his opinion. Will you please repeat this story? I enjoyed it very much from your meeting with. Okay, I'll just review what
Refresh
you said.
my memory on that. I remember having a conversation with Postman. I forget what it was about.
Yeah, so in
And
June, you said that the postman rang your doorbell, not to deliver mail, but simply to ask your opinion, what you thought of the Tolkien, the movie about Tolkien,
Right, the drama.
the
about
docu,
J.R.
the docudrama, yeah.
Yeah, he was specifically interested in that. That's why he rang my
That's
doorbell.
pretty cool.
Oh,
That was very interesting. No, he hadn't seen it yet, and he was asking my recommendation whether he should go see it or not.
Very good.
I have not seen it,
yeah.
so I only had
have.
everybody else's
Yep.
to go on. And from what I heard, I said, well, it focuses on the romantic relationship between he and his to-be wife, and which is a very formative, important part of Tolkien and his writings. If you just look at their tombstones, that will give that away. Beren and Luthien and such.
And then also,
And then it kind of ends right around when he's starting The Hobbit. It doesn't really go into the rest of that. So,
it also spends a lot of time on the TCBS on the
Right.
Yeah.
his
yeah,
friends.
It's all those
Yeah.
formative
His war
years.
service.
Yeah, because those guys definitely also have a
So
formative influence.
I
as
said,
well.
based on what I heard from the others, if you're interested in more relationship and formative years about Tolkien, then definitely go check it out. If you're
Yeah.
looking for examples of his writing and the development of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, this is not the right movie.
Right.
But it will teach you where he got a lot of his experiences that shaped that. So he's like, oh, okay, that's great. That sounds interesting. He's like, sounds like something I could take my wife to. And I'm like, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
It's a safe bet.
He's got relationship stuff. So
Sure.
the stereotype there.
Okay, so good.
Yeah. And it's because of the RPG bus and RPG trailer and all that up front.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
did you see the dragons you guys came in?
No.
You didn't see the dragon standing right there in the
Yeah.
foyer?
Was it I thought was it the gargoyle or?
It's a dragon.
Oh, it's a dragon.
And it's a mailbox post. It's going to be holding my mailbox and everything. Katie
Nice.
got it.
Oh, good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Afraid I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, failed your perception check.
Yeah.
So as you're leaving, check that out. It's right in the foyer. It's a gray dragon
Where?
about this tall. And,
Scratches his nose. Okay.
Yeah, so Katie got that with some wedding money.
Wonderful. Questions about Erendel's armor in our current reading of The Fall of Gondolin. Talks about a mithril coat that Erendel wore as a boy.
Yeah, I was,
And then question about that and the reference to, was Tolkien borrowing that idea when he ends up writing in the fact that Thorin gives Bilbo a mithril coat?
well, I was speculating that was possibly the same coat.
Right.
Which a number of people have done.
Yep.
Speculated that.
Yep.
Is there anything definitive? Is Michael Martinez
Nope,
anybody
I
find
looked.
definitive about that code?
Nope.
Okay. So
No,
it's all conjecture.
the quote says, Thorin says, well, actually, it wasn't even Thorin saying it. He says this is a,
Gandalf, wasn't it?
great worth. Well, that's in the Lord of the Rings where he says, Bilbo didn't know that it was worth more than the
Right.
whole Shire.
Right.
But in The Hobbit, when Thorin presents it to him as kind of his, before their relationship sours, he kind of gives this as a token of his esteem for him, and it's clearly referred to as a mithril coat of great worth to his house, and that it was made. The comment is that it was probably made for a young elven prince, but it doesn't say it was. It just says it may have been.
Yeah, right.
Classic Tolkien.
Yep.
So leaves the door open.
Yep.
Um,
Well, and that's often how old lore is. I mean, you look at all the things that we extrapolate 1,000 years later, 2,000 whatever years
Sometimes
later.
just 100 years.
We're
Sure.
downright guessing most of the time.
Yeah.
Based on a few limited tidbits.
but certainly,
And we have a more modern information society to work with.
right?
And we
Yes.
still do that.
Well, and you could also say, couldn't you, that whether it was the same coat or not, to possess a mithril coat was certainly a princely gift.
Yeah, definitely a princely gift, yes.
You could have bought the entire Shire.
Yeah.
Instead, he raised it.
Then some.
So, the next thing about the notes last month was that Richard commented on constructed languages, because obviously that's something very much that Tolkien was interested in, and recommended the Conlang Critic channel on YouTube. So I put a link in the notes for that. And then Hawk read Tolkien Letter 157, and this was from 1954, and it was referring to the recent publication of The Two Towers. And he was writing to Catherine Farrer, who was a fan and had written him several letters, and so it was a nice letter to her. He commented on the word. We presume that she asked where did the word "ent" come from, and so he commented on the fact that it was a word from the Anglo-Saxon, meaning giant. And he says also that he was behind on the appendices. He was trying to write the appendices furiously because he was finishing up the Return of the King so that could be published, and so he was behind on the appendices, which you can just really imagine. And then he said that Christopher, his son, was not able to help with the maps right then, which is really interesting as well because obviously, I love maps. It's interesting to see like Tolkien's original maps, which are quite good, but Christopher's I think are even better. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Oh, what do I think about the maps?
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Like as a matter of fact, I just hung my. I got a special edition of the Silmarillion book, and at the very back of the book is a full color map of Land of Beleriand and the other realms in Silmarillion.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I hung that up, and it's a very, very high quality map. It's got full color, and so.
Yeah, he took it kind of even, one step further, taking his father's creation and just making it vivid, I felt.
Good, superb reproduction, I think.
Oh, yeah. And then I really respect other map-making efforts that have been done since then. There's many good efforts out there that I've seen. Anybody else want to comment on maps at this point?
I did
Well-
find a map where somebody overlaid Europe on top of
To
his
compare the
map.
size, kind of?
Well, their goal was to, well, what if this was set in the Ice Age when the water level was lower? And,
Sure.
And they managed to get a pretty good correlation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
Beth
Got it very
Beth
smart.
Ann had, when she was over in England, had gotten me a map that had been squirreled away for a while, and just last month, my wife framed it and hung it on
Nice.
the wall in the Ruby room. So
Very good.
I'm very pleased.
Well, and then one of Tolkien's maps, I think it was his, not Christopher's, was actually given to Pauline Baines, I think, and he had annotated it. This was found just about 2 years ago. And
Right, we covered that.
We covered
pretty
that.
thoroughly.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see where notes where he was saying this would be probably the same latitude as
That's very
Oxford,
cool.
Yeah, elephants here,
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I think he even put
Elephants in
giraffes.
Oxford?
I think he even put giraffes on there. Like
Yeah.
giraffes here.
Elephants in Oxford?
No.
Yeah, map
It was in-
map overlays
Yeah.
are a good, interesting topic of study.
Yes. Okay. And then Hawk read letter 158, in which John Ronald Reuel Tolkien takes issue on the Two Towers jacket blurb, and saying basically the person who wrote it apparently didn't even read the story because they were giving away the plot in the blurb, but they weren't actually telling what it was really about. So it's like, if you're going to give away the plot, you might as well actually be accurate. So I did find, and I included a link on there, but I'm not able to open it up big size on my phone, so I don't know if you want to take time, but we have an image from a facsimile of the original flyleaf on the Two Towers if you want to read what the blurb actually says.
Where is this? Where do you have
It's
it?
in the it's a link in the notes.
Okay.
I don't know if you can get to it or not.
Yeah.
Can you get it? I can't read it very well.
No,
because-
the resolution is too poor.
Yeah.
I brought those.
It's on eBay. It's an eBay facsimile.
It's for sale.
Yeah, they make facsimiles. It's obviously.
No, eBay, it's just for display. They don't sell anything.
Keep going. I'll
Okay.
look
All right.
for it.
So we'll come back to that. And then Hawk riffs on being misquoted from in interviews, and how sometimes you can be like Tolkien felt that he wasn't being very well represented in the jacket blurb. That can happen to any of us. And then Richard riffs on the challenge of summarizing one's own work. I believe that's what it was, right? You were talking
I
about.
don't remember.
It was 2 months ago, I know. And then about how editors can butcher the author's intent.
Oh, yeah.
And then Hawk
Editors.
Dwarves and dwarfs.
and nasturtians and
Talk
nasturtians.
the Vogon poetry
Okay,
and
so-
cut it down to size.
Did you get it?
You want me to read the?
It's on the right-hand
Yeah, the
side.
right-hand side there. I can read it.
Okay.
So, The Lord of the Rings is not a book to be described in a few sentences. It is an heroic romance, something which has scarcely been attempted on the scale since Spenser's Fairy Queen. So one can't praise the book by comparisons. There is nothing to compare it with. What can I say then? Continues Richard Hughes. For width of imagination, so W-I-D-T-H, it almost beggars parallel, and it is nearly as remarkable for its vividness and for the narrative skill which carries the reader on enthralled for page after page. By an extraordinary feat of the imagination, Mr. Tolkien has created and maintains in every detail a new mythology in an invented world. As for the story itself, it's really super science fiction, declared Naomi Mitchison after reading the first part, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
But it is timeless and will go on and on. It's odd, you know. One takes it completely seriously as Mallory. Tolkien had some things to say about Mallory. C.S. Lewis is equally enthusiastic. If Ariosto rivaled it in invention, in fact he does not, he would still lack its heroic seriousness. No imaginary world has been projected which is at once as multifarious
Yes.
and so true to its own inner laws, it's really hard to read. None so seemingly objective, so disinfected from the faint
So this is all praise.
taint of an author's merely individual psychology. None so relevant to the actual human situation, yet so free from allegory. That's a big one. Boy, and they debated that one. And what fine shading there is in the variations of style to meet the almost endless diversity of scenes and characters. Comic, homely, epic, monstrous, or diabolic. Spencer, Mallory, Aristo, or science fiction. A flavor of all of them and a taste of its own. Only those who have read The Lord of the Rings will realize how impossible it is to convey all the qualities of a great book.
Okay,
so
but
that's
this doesn't
not-
say
that
anything
doesn't
about-
give anything away about the story itself.
I'm not sure because it's very brief. I'll just reread it, but it says, I have only just had time to glance at the Houghton Mifflin jacket stuff. This account must have been written by someone who has not read the book but relied on hearsay inaccurately remembered. The giving away of the plot is, of course, a silly and unnecessary procedure, but at least the plot given away might be that of the book described, or is that part of
You
the
said
game?
the Houghton Mifflin version.
Yeah, isn't that the
This
same?
is the Alan Unwin version. Well,
Well,
I guess
this
that
is-
is Houghton Mifflin, but it doesn't say Houghton.
It's from a letter to Rainer Unwin, and he
Okay.
says in 1954. So one assumes this is the first edition.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Unless it's Houghton
US,
Mifflin, the
the
American
US,
version.
that's correct.
Right, that's the American
Yeah.
This
distributor.
is okay. Sorry,
Alan
this is a
Unwin was
first
the
edition
original-
of the.
British.
British.
It says, this
Yeah.
says printed in Great Britain.
Okay, well
Yeah,
that's my fault then.
It's written
Yeah.
in a completely different language.
British, English.
So yeah,
Yeah, they-
so
Okay, well I apologize. I did
that's
not-
actually.
I did not
interesting.
realize that
Right,
the third was
but that's
different.
great. I like that's a good link though. That's,
Okay, well I'm gonna have to
That
now
is a
go and
very
find.
good
Actually,
link.
I can feel
it
Tolkien's
does
hackles.
not help support the premise, but it is a very cool link.
I can
Yeah.
kind of feel Tolkien's hackles get
And
up
I'm going to save
over
that
the,
image
uh,
file because that's
over a
good
heroic
for our archives.
romance comment, because that was more like what Silmarillion was.
I'll send you that one. Yeah. Go ahead.
I finished.
But I only just started listening. Okay, so I need to find the Two Towers American the dust jacket. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
written in a completely
Continue?
different language.
Okay, so almost to the end of the notes. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, talking about being misquoted, I gave an example of
Yes.
other reporters and such claiming
Sure.
to have interviewed me who never spoke to me and do these long things. And they were basically pitching the value of the goats and animal simulator games. And they were quoting all of my research and theories about the benefit of role-playing games.
What?
And they're applying it to the goat simulator and animal simulator video games, and acting as though they interviewed me, never spoke to them, and were quoting completely out of context.
That's weird.
Yeah, completely, and multiple articles floating around to that effect.
I demand a retraction.
I tried, no response from anybody.
Right.
Out of context is the best kind of context.
Okay.
What publication was this part of?
These were multiple online video game magazines. And such.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So,
Okay. So
just one of many examples.
then Hawk read letter 159 from Letters of Tolkien. This contained reflections on seeing the fairy story find an eager audience. So this is actually after, I believe, this is from 1955, so it doesn't say, but it's very likely that that the Return of the King had been published. But he was saying that he appreciated the fact that there was an eager audience for the adult fairy story, which is what he hoped. Also, Tolkien compares his literary machine or production to C.S. Lewis in being slower than C.S. Lewis's energy. Tolkien thought that the Inklings did not influence one another.
What? Not.
It's true.
That's called denial.
Yes.
No, but it's interesting what he says, and it bears actually repeating here because he contrasts.
They didn't directly change one another.
Right. He
No.
contrasts their enjoyment of each other's presence and conversation versus understanding the other's mind, and saying that they were too set and too different
Yes.
to influence one another.
In fact, in some
you
cases,
mean
it probably entrenched them further.
yes, if you mean influence as in
Direct.
changing someone's mind,
Right.
that may be the case.
Yeah.
Because
They didn't change their minds.
British men just don't change their minds. But if you mean influence as in borrow, what is it? Borrowing from many sources is research. Borrowing from one source is plagiarism. No, they influenced one another.
Of course they did. Well, everyone does, don't they?
Yes.
But I think he draws a kind of a hard line between personal influence and authorial influence, which I'm not sure you can really draw that hard of a line. But
The Jewish side of me would say, no, that's impossible to compartmentalize.
I would like to briefly refer to, I did bring along just for sake of his argument, he was saying that Lewis, Charles Williams,
Uh-huh.
and himself, and he's saying we all are very different from that. But I don't want to read from here right now. I want to finish the notes, but if you decide you want to hear, we can hear some differences there. So that's if we have time today. Hawk and Richard discussed their struggles and successes in writing, and there was a discussion of The Golden Key by George MacDonald and Smith of Wootton Major by Tolkien.
Mhm.
And then also somehow you guys snuck in there Star Wars and the development of the 9 stories. Changes in purpose from the beginning to the end.
I think that had to do with how Tolkien rewrote and rewrote.
Oh,
and
sure.
rewrote.
Yes.
And then others' interpretations.
Yes.
As we see in the films and such.
Yes.
Yeah, because there was a
Because
changeover
Lucas
in the
had
most
written
recent
out
movies.
An outline.
Oh, yes.
Which I have one of the early comic books and such, which shows the old Han Solo having his encounter with Jabba the Hutt. He
Yeah.
was just a very large,
Yeah.
rotund man. At the
Yeah,
time.
he was a fat Irishman, I believe. Played by Declan Mulholland.
And and it had a lot of other scenes in it that were cut from the film and such. But also, he had in his outline a lot very different stuff that ended up happening later. Part of that is because he wanted to change things for his daughter Tiger and things.
So, would you say that George Lucas had an equal distaste for Disney as Tolkien did?
Well, Lucas is quoted as saying, "I was always sticking it to the man. Now I am the man, and I don't know if I can handle that, so I'm handing it off." He's like it was this cognitive dissonance.
Isn't that kind
Yeah.
of like handing it
Being
over
the
to the
man.
Sith?
Yeah.
Pretty much. But I think he's just kind of like, I'm not doing this anymore. And
He's a fascinating
but
person.
he was really struggling with all of that.
Yeah.
I love, this is very much an aside, but there is a great documentary on Netflix about the making of the original Star Wars movies. So that's worth seeing. Okay.
And
Yeah.
though he may not have agreed with where he thought Disney would take it in direction, Disney was probably the best bet of having the resources to make it go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And just about anybody else who would have taken it
Yeah.
might have struggled. You couldn't count it on them being around.
Oh,
and it's
and
kind
it
of
just
it's
died.
kind of like the BBC version of Lewis
Right.
and the Walden Media version
was
of
good.
Lewis.
The-
Both of them are good in their own way.
Yeah.
But come on, complete the darn thing,
Yeah.
please.
Yes.
They didn't have the resources to
Yes.
continue. Yeah.
Yeah, very good point there. As an author, which do you prefer, or which is better?
What's your legacy
to
to
not
live in
see
some
to
form?
not see all of it to be produced, or to see all of it produced, but maybe not with your full direction.
Yeah.
That's a hard choice to make.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things was George Lucas went out of his way to include some of the ideas of the fan base, and then Disney comes along, and then he hands it over to Disney, and
Yeah,
say,
they erased
none
all
of your
of
stuff
that.
matters.
Yeah, well,
It's
I
it's
can
a-
see why that would upset some
It's a
people.
dialogue, I suppose. Well, yeah, and ultimately the fans will be the ones that will have the final say, won't they? Because it depends on how much support they'll give.
well, for example, so I was just on Gen Con TV yesterday in Seattle, and they were talking about how Disney is pretty much dropping X-Men and the others for a while because
Yeah.
the last one flopped.
Oh.
And there's a lot of, upset about that.
Mhm.
And so it's on Table Takes on Gen Con TV on Twitch. And so they go into length about it. And I think it's just Disney doing their usual. The market's saturated for this content. Let's
Correct.
set it aside for a while.
Correct.
We'll let demand build back up again, and just like they've done with their own
For the
movies, where
past
they
80
would artificially
years.
take them off the market.
Yeah.
You couldn't even get the videos.
That's correct.
That's changed now, but when it was VHS and such rental, they literally would cycle through for like 10, 12 years. You could not get a certain movie anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would build demand, and then it would come back and it would be a limited 6-month release. Sales and rentals would max out, and then it would start to slow down, and they'd take it off the market again. And so it's
Merchandise.
well, it is a technique of PR, or public relations, aka propaganda, aka marketing, of trying to create perceived scarcity, even if it's an artificial sense of scarcity. That creates urgency in people to want to hurry and go out and buy it
Impulse
before
buy.
it is gone.
Yep.
A sense of urgency. So you get them to buy now rather than go, oh, it'll be around, I'll get it later.
Yeah.
Playing with supply and the market, the free market of supply and demand.
And that's, you know what, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fun there. As long as you're not having government thumbs on the scale, that's when it breaks.
Yeah.
So, and then the last meeting finished with a decision to postpone the next reading of The Fall of Gondolin until the next meeting.
When
And
there were
since
more
we didn't
people.
have a meeting in July,
Yep.
therefore the next meeting is August 17, 2019,
Which is now.
which is now.
And here we are.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, those are the
Welcome,
notes.
welcome. All right, thank you very much, Brian. I really
Yep.
appreciate you putting all that together. Ex post facto in
Pretty much.
absentia.
Yeah.
So, welcome everybody. It's been a little bit of a gap. Thank you, Richard, for making it last time. I'm glad everybody's here. So, let's start with any topics you guys want to go ahead and cover.
Great idea.
If you want to go ahead and start, you have
Yeah,
a topic
so,
you want to bring
okay.
up.
So, the Silmarillion trilogy, yes or no?
So, what do you mean, Silmarillion trilogy? Yes or no?
You think it should be made
Book, movie, TV show? What do you mean?
into either a film series or a movie TV series?
Okay,
Why
so
trilogy?
visual media.
Do you
So
think the
why
trilogy
limited
itself
to a
works really
trilogy?
well?
Yeah, for example, I was thinking the first one could be about Beren and Luthien.
Mm-hmm.
The second one could be about the children of Hurin, with the
Oh,
story
I
of
see.
Turin Tarambar. The third one could
Great
be
tales.
basically they're great tales, and then the final one would be the Fall of Gondolin.
Wow.
Yeah,
What
so
about
I think
Numenor and all the rest
yeah, I
of
think the
that?
first one would be easily marketable because it's kind of a love story. Second one, not so much, not so sure because it's more of a tragedy. And then the third one would basically be a war film. So
What
do you guys
about
think
the
of that?
early life of Smaug?
Yeah.
Who cares?
So I have always wanted, and I had started writing the script for years ago, a series in the style of BBC. So first as audio only,
Yeah.
and then as an
Yeah,
animated
yeah.
series.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I never had the rights to it, so I could never produce it. But I was putting the script together, and I was using the material as the source, everything quoted properly, etc., and then fill in the blanks when there was nothing else to fill it in.
Yeah.
And starting with the creation of the universe with the Valaquenta and such, the Ainu Lindale,
Yeah.
creation of the world, starting with music, and moving forward through the mythology from there. And I hope somebody someday gets pushed to do that. And with Amazon being able to push into the second age here, with the upcoming series, I think we're getting that much closer to that reality.
Wow.
And these are
Coming
epic
soon.
stories.
Yeah.
And there are so many of them. Any one of them you could do a whole season on. So I would love to see, for the longer ones,
Amazon
an entire
seasons,
season
yeah.
for the
Wow.
Tales of the Silmarillion or whatever.
That's
An
damn.
ongoing series. If I had the resources, I would do that. I would, if I could get the licensing,
Yeah.
I would totally do that.
Yeah, it's maybe
There have
my-
been multiple
yeah.
fan film attempts, and they've been shut down by
Oh.
either Tolkien, now Middle Earth Enterprises, or the Tolkien estate.
Yeah.
Because they changed the names. They tweaked them. This is what's not fair. They changed it so they weren't violating the names, but they still were able to shut them down because the stories were identical. And that's kind of, as far as I know, that's kind of unprecedented. I've not heard of being shut down for the story being parallel, but they just basically harassed with one legal file after another till they couldn't move forward and could never release. They're just buried in court filing after court filing, and it just forced them to oblivion. But they had shot a lot of it, and it was going to be released for free, just like The Hunt for Gollum and
Born of Hope.
Born of Hope and such. But it was stories from the Silmarillion. And they just shaved off the serial numbers. And usually you can get away with that under fair use. And they wouldn't let them do it. And they had put a lot of time and money and effort and community added into this film. And it's never seen the light of day. I saw clips of it because of my back channels, but never got to see the light of day. Also, multiple albums, musicians' albums and such, because they had Tolkien-inspired music. But if they had even one line, like quoting straight from or something, if they didn't pay the licensing to North Enterprises, they couldn't release the album.
Wow.
Now, that's later. For example, you have earlier versions with Led Zeppelin and many others who that wasn't being enforced, so they got away with it.
Yeah.
But because now it's been proven there's big money since the Peter Jackson films, it has been quite tyrannical. The long arm of the shadow has grown long indeed.
Yeah.
So that's anybody else? There's a really good question.
So that would be a trilogy to start with. There's a lot of others.
So could you defeat them by throwing a lawyer into a volcano?
No. Because then they would just get another one.
Okay, maybe the license agreement?
But hopefully someday there will be something like that. I think it'll depend heavily on how the Amazon series goes.
Yeah,
when's that? Got the lock-in for now.
Yeah, so is that going to come out pretty soon?
Chris, did you want to give an update on that?
2021, I think.
Is there anything you wanted to say on the
3-year contract?
Oh no!
Okay.
What you had
$500 million
sent?
So
was
currently, so I just checked the Twitter feed for their channel, and the only new material that's come out. There's lots of specs you can go into about how much money. It's an incredible amount of money, which is encouraging in the one sense that if they get good creative direction, they will have an unprecedented ability to do what basically was the bump that the Lord of the Rings was in terms of bumping up to a new level. I mean, really, the what would you say? The vision. Tolkien himself said this. You could bring this to stage. You could bring this to film, but in his time, he said, it would just look so hokey.
Right.
Because at that time, the special effects just were not even possible. So then by the time you get to the late 90s, early 2000s, now, at that point, it's possible to render a lot of things that you couldn't before. Now, we're almost 20 years later. By the time this comes out, it will be about 20 years later. Hi, Corey.
Have I made it for the halftime?
Yeah.
Have I made it for halftime?
Do we have an extra chair?
Any elves doing the high line?
There's some folding chairs right in the foyer as you came in. If you want to bring one of those down.
Okay, there's one there too.
That's not. I wouldn't recommend it.
So really, when you think about it, it's 20 years on by the time they actually come out. You know, just like you would have had like the 1990s, late 1990s is when they would have started production on the original movies, you know, or year 2000 or so. Yeah, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
In the same way, similarly, they're getting everything lined up, you know, casting, filming, whatever, in the next year. So you have the next jump in terms of technology and the ability to create.
Do you want to scoot on over here?
Yeah, sure. But there is one more thing.
I'll put a little bit of a. One of the things is.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that I've observed is through reading is that the Star Trek Discovery series, the ability for them to have, you know, triple, quadruple the production budget of the prior series, and it be a moneymaker for CBS, a big moneymaker. I am guilty of paying the online subscription for CBS for that, just for that, and because of that, they've been able to light even a third season, which was unthinkable at the time. So, and spin off 2 more shows coming, Picard and Section 31.
Right.
So, I'm theorizing that if the demand, if the fans are out there and they pay for it specifically by watching it, then Amazon will come out with more.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
the way the market works.
absolutely right, and
Yeah.
this is encouraging. So this was sorry.
You're fine.
This just came out recently. Tom Shippey was interviewed by a German.
Oh yes.
This is Deutsche Tolkien Gesellschaft, Literature, Fantasy, and Fandom. And in this exclusive interview with Tom Shippey concerning LOTR on Prime, it says here, just 20 minutes after the release of the Amazon trailer for the creative team of the Lord of the Rings series, we had the opportunity at Tolkien Thing to interview Tom Shippey, who, if you don't know, Tom Shippey has written extensively about J.R.R.
Quite a
Tolkien.
few of his books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's a recognized author. About the trailer and the project exclusively because he's actually involved as a consultant.
Oh.
He is one of the 20 names presented in the video that was released and had not yet seen the video himself. Together we went through the trailer piece by piece, which was analyzed by Shippey and us. And of course, it doesn't give anything away. All we
Right.
know at this point still is this
Just
is
opinions.
we do know it's going to be set in the Second Age. They've made that clear.
Right.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, but the creative team that they're assembling, I think, is meant to instill confidence in the fans so that they know kind of like who is really working on this.
Peter Jackson.
So the trailer's already been released?
The trailer this trailer is simply it is meant to be kind of a trailer to show the people who are creating it. So it's like a story about the story.
Oh, okay.
Who's actually putting this together?
Okay.
So you'll have to go and look at it yourself. I'd be happy to send it to you. It should be also in the links.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think I have it in the
No,
notes.
it's not.
Okay, so I'll reference that here. But it just says here, I'll read a blurb of it. Tom, what do you think about the video? Well, it doesn't really give much away. The map, which can be seen in the video, does not reveal much information. It does not contain place names or anything. The map nevertheless reveals that this is the Second Age, as Numenor is still there. However, this creates a lot of problems because we don't know much about the Second Age. How so? It is difficult because the Second Age kind of stopped twice, once with the fall of Numenor and then about 150 years later with the last alliance and the defeat of Sauron. The end of the Second Age on a map looks about the same as the beginning of the Third Age in terms of place names, coastline, or borderlines. In addition, the difference to the middle of the Second Age is already much greater. Numenor is still listed on the map, the place names are different. We are literally before the transformation of the world by Iluvatar. It will be of great importance for the series when exactly the plot takes place, at which point in Middle-earth history something happens. This was one of our difficulties when creating a map for the Second Age because you have to determine very precisely what date this map should be from. Tolkien wrote some of it down, but as far as the Second Age goes, the information we have is a 3-page timeline in the appendices to The Lord of the Rings and the list of the kings of Numenor, and a little more material in the Unfinished Tales, but that's about all. And then they ask a number of questions afterwards. So does Amazon have a free hand in the interpretation? Does the Tolkien estate have a veto on changes? What about the First and Third Ages? And where did they film the scenes with you in the trailer? Do you know any of the names presented in the video? Do you know anything about the start of the production? And then rumors about possible shooting locations. What do you think about the location debate? And then kind of the marketing strategy. What do you think about what they're doing? What do you think they should do more, etc.? And he's kind of in favor of telling the fans more. Obviously, they're trying to give only a little bit out at a time. But that's it. It's just a very short amount, but it does show there are things that are given to us so that we know, for example, that the director for the first 2 episodes will be the director of Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom? Fallen World.
Something
Fallen
like
World, right.
Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom.
There you go, thank you. That's what I meant to say.
Who's that? Do we know?
Jurassic World Moniker of the Week.
It's not like Joe Johnston, is it?
I don't remember who it was, but
I
a
just
friend of
saw the
mine
name.
on Facebook was like, this guy wrote a trash version of Jurassic Park. I'm not really happy about them
Well,
running
this is
the Lord of the Rings.
This is the danger, really, of telling people who your creative cast, as it were, is, because
Right.
it's obviously
Some
you're going
people
to be
are
looking and
judgmental.
saying, "Oh, he did this and we didn't like that. The question is really how they're going to gel. What kind of power they're going to have.
One of the things I've been looking for that I haven't been able to confirm or deny is something like, is Weta involved in the creation of the world?
What do you mean?
What a digital?
Right. For example, and they've been really silent about the issue.
Oh, Weta's fantastic. I hope
Yes.
they do.
Well, the fact that they've been silent for so long, they may not.
Yeah. Because I think that would be only in their favor. Most people were very spoke very highly of Weta's work.
So there's an example of.
Unless it's too early. I mean, that could be the thing.
That could be the case.
They're just trying to leak this out very.
In a controlled manner.
Because if you say Weta's going to be doing it, then people want to start seeing mock-ups.
It's like when Alan Greenspan hiccups.
Yeah. And then it was Ben Bernanke. Now it's what's her name?
Well, no, Yellen's gone now, and
really?
someone else is in there.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. When the Federal Reserve Chairman speaks.
Yes.
Or hiccups.
Yeah. So you're saying, in other words, that sometimes to say as little as possible is best. Is that your view? Well, let's get back to.
Well, you could be setting an expectation.
Yeah.
Or you could be hiding the fact that your expectations might be completely. And now for something completely different.
So to return to Anthony's question, make sure we're answering yours. You're saying, should the Silmarillion be made into a trilogy? I have to ask you kind of a question in kind is, if, as it seems to be the case, that they have the rights to make, on Amazon Prime, more of an episodical kind of long-term second age.
Yeah.
Your interest is especially in the first age, I think, because those three great tales are all, I think, from the first age, aren't they?
Yes.
How do you feel about them making the choice to go to the second age now?
Well, one question I have is, the account is named Lord of the Rings on Prime. Are they really going to rename it, just Lord of the Rings, or are they going to come up with a different title?
That's a very good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because technically,
obviously that would be very confusing.
Yeah, it would be.
Well, so I read about this.
That's probably
too.
just a working title to catch people's attention.
I think it is, but that was actually explored because of the confusion piece of it. But they're kind of like they want to keep that as a working title because the idea is. Yeah. It's really the beginning of how does he become the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. So going to show
because the very first thing that they actually posted on Twitter was the One Ring that ruled them all poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So you've got the 3 rings for the Elven Kings. You've got the
so
9.
do you think they're going to be doing it as vignettes, story vignettes, where around the fireplace or an elven home or something, and
that would certainly work.
Going back in time
to keep a thread.
Yeah.
So you've got
so that you've got modern between the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings time period.
I don't know. That would be very interesting.
And then doing vignettes back to there.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then potentially tying in the current progression towards the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. It's either that or they're going to say we're in universe at that time, and it's going to be starting at a point. Really, I think it would make the most sense, and I'd like to know what everyone else thinks here.
Yeah.
Is what if you started, and I know you spent a lot of time in this era, but like, who are the Numenorians? Because a lot of people who are Lord of the Rings fans don't really know.
Yep,
these are the guys.
Modules about
these are
that.
Aragorn's ancestors. Okay, all right. The people out there who don't really know the books could start to hook this in and say, okay, we need to create enough interest in the Numenorians.
Yeah.
I think they're going to start early enough that they're going to see how this civilization unfolds. There's plenty of room for little mini stories, but you've got to get pretty quickly to where they get to Middle Earth and they capture Sauron. Because that's when it gets really interesting.
They could do something as terrible as a reskinning of the Krypton saga.
Yeah, I would. A very interesting time period is when the Numenorians show up and Sauron surrenders.
Yes.
He just caves, and all his minions just disappear. They just melt away. And he just, bows his head and lets them take him. And then he spends the years whispering poison into our Pharazad's ears
Yeah.
as the Numerians grow to become more and more dominating.
See, that's season
Not the
2
gift
right there.
bringers, etc.
I think season 1 is the build
Little
up
lead up to it.
to the confrontation, and then the big what he goes with them back
And
to
then
Numenor.
we could wrap up season 3 with the fall of Numenor
Absolutely.
and the remaking of the world.
And then you've got that
Sinking
dovetail
of Beleriand and
into
all
new life with Isildur and Anarion with her father Elendil.
It's basically a whole new generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
fall
then,
of Numenor.
and then that would have to lead
Yeah.
up to the War of the Last Alliance, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on what they're thinking.
Oh, there's so many ways they could go with it.
The difficulty of that is the purists are going to have. It's
Up in
going to
arms.
be rife
Aneurysms.
with no matter no matter
I was
what
thinking
you
pitchfork
do.
and torches.
There's some people you'll never be able to
No
please.
matter what you do, there
already
is
exists.
going to be
Yeah.
robust argument
Yes.
every
Yes.
which way.
Lots and lots of artistic interpretation
Yes.
because Tolkien left lots of room
Yes.
for open it for
Other
other
hands.
hands and
You're bringing
minds.
Krypton into this.
So I guess before we move away from this, I'm really curious to see what we think. What would be? I mean, there's going to be lots of different opinions, but what would be minimum? Like, okay, if they do a good job, I hope at
Well,
least that they do this.
An observation is they're putting it on Prime, so they have the opportunity to do a television series with an overarching storyline, which is the new thing
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah.
Well, they like people binging.
Also,
Right,
it allows
but-
them to not do cliffhangers every single time.
But
Right.
it doesn't. That lets you avoid Orson Scott Card's movie had everything crammed into the one movie.
Yeah.
And it was
you
just
can't do that with the Silmarillion.
right.
Yeah.
Because they're doing it, if they did it as a series, then they avoid that pitfall,
Right.
and it's more likely that they'll do that rather than the episodic reset button every week, which really annoys
but-
me.
Oh
But
yeah.
they-
I hope
they-
they don't do it episodal.
they-
That would
Which one?
But all
The reset button.
do any of the Tolkien stuff as episodal.
the
I mean-
It needs to be continuing.
There needs to be
arc.
an overarching story. There needs to be an overarching storyline.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that should be connected
Yeah.
as Tolkien intended in
Yeah.
the Legendarium.
Well, that would make sense just to see what the relevance is. I mean, there's so many things one could do. You could have little cameos like the Ring of Barry here that Aragorn wears. Yeah, I mean, but that's first age. So I don't think they actually have license to be in the first age.
No, not this point.
I think they have the license.
And they're
to be-
stretching. They're really stretching.
Their time machine doesn't go back that far.
You
can only go back 7 months.
Sorry, broke off in the second age.
It's got like a copyright infringement button on there that has a little.
H.G. Wells said, "Nope, this and no further.
You shall not pass.
You shall not.
You shall not violate this copyright."
So, which is better, in your opinion, to start with the beginning of Numenor, where they get the land, and then to go forward there, or to start where they're already in Numenor, and you see their might, and they're sailing to Middle Earth, and
that's a good
kind of
question.
showing because really, if you start there, if you choose to start there, you're with Ar-Pharazôn already. You're basically, it's the same emperor dude over
Well,
all the Numenorians.
The way it's written, that's the most visually sophisticated and impactful
And then
image
you
that
can
you
just
could
have
do, and it's a
numerous
visual medium.
flashbacks.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
What was that, Chris?
And then you can just have numerous flashbacks.
Yeah.
To
It's the '60s all over again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly.
if you remember, Corey, that's remember you weren't there, man.
We start in the third age,
repeated,
doing a
yeah.
flashback to the second age,
that
so a
what you're
character
saying?
doing a flashback to the first age.
And that's the loophole that gets you out H.G. Wells.
Welcome to As Middle Earth Turns, the continuing saga.
And then Marty McFly shows up in a DeLorean.
Yes.
so this just turns into the soap opera of Brandon Luthien.
I hope not. No, because if they ever do it, they've got to do it well, like Anthony was saying. It's got to be, like, you've got to throw all your energy into it because it's the best. I think it's better than any love story that Shakespeare ever wrote. It's one of the best I've ever seen in English literature, bar none.
Wow.
So,
That's pretty.
yep.
I'm just. I think you guys are more of perennial optimists. I don't have a tendency to trust the modern
My glass is half full. How dare you say otherwise?
the modern writers nowadays.
Handling the guests there, Brian.
That's fine. Me and Brian are brothers. We do this kind of stuff to one another. But
They usually try to keep them ritual murder off camera.
when a bunch of writers
That's in the
when a bunch of
also.
when a bunch of modern writers are put in a room and they're told to come up with whatever we can to excite people, it's always bothered me a little bit that
People love mutton, don't they?
Tom Shippey is involved, which gives me great hope.
Yeah, well, Brian Knitzel was involved in Avatar, and see how that went.
Does Peter Jackson have a consulting fee?
He's not involved, but here's my
Probably.
only
He's not.
concern.
Probably.
He's not
Most likely.
involved.
His time machine doesn't even have a lever. But I'm still concerned, not because of Peter Jackson, but because they want to make something like Game of
Yes,
Thrones.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
every time you try to duplicate something else that did well, you tend
Then
to,
you can,
It's just not
Well,
as powerful.
Derivative, yeah.
Game of Thrones had a particular gimmick that attracted audiences.
I think
Which
the
one?
question is,
The porn series.
Oh, you mean like the German 1970s porn?
Yeah, that
Okay,
was the
back on track, guys.
Sorry.
I'm just saying that I think there's enough in the Second Age that there's enough good material. They don't have to try to change it up too much. Fill in the blank spots, sure.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
But stick to the flavor of it.
As much as I agree with you that there are virtues about entering into the Second Age, like there's also some trade-offs that come
Jeremy
with.
Dragon.
like I do not doubt that they have more free reign, but sometimes I feel like if you give somebody too much free reign, and they call everything
hang
artistic license, then it's like, oh, we could just magically make stuff appear and
Unicorn.
one
Now
exec.
that looked like Leonard Nimoy doing a Hobbit video just then.
Oh yeah, one exec turns the other. and says,
Shatner in Star Trek 5.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
There
we've
be
answered
whales.
Anthony's
That's
question.
Sufficiently.
Does anybody else have another question they would like to ask? Any other business that
We'll
they
discuss,
want to bring up? Yeah,
I've got a book.
Yes, wonderful.
Brought a book.
So my father handed me this book about 2 months ago. It is called. Let me see. It is
Flame
called
Imperishable.
the Eternal Flame.
The Flame Imperishable.
The Flame Imperishable by Jonathan S. McIntosh. And it is, the subtext is Tolkien, St. Thomas, and the metaphysics of fairy. Yes. And from what I've read so far, he is doing there's been a lot of discussion about, well, how much influence was Tolkien's Catholicism into his world in general. And McIntosh is positing here. This is I'm gonna call it this is an academic book. It is a slog to read because he's pulling a ton of sources on both sides of the argument together.
So yeah, it has footnotes and an index.
Lots of footnotes.
Do you have
Almost
an example
every
that you
page.
want to read an
Yeah.
excerpt from?
Does it have pictures?
Or is it too soon?
Yeah, but he's comparing specifically the Ina Lindelay
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica
Oh, yeah.
and the ideas between the two.
Wow, that's interesting.
And he then goes on to talk at length in the chapter that I'm reading right now about the potential influence of Jacques Mauritian, who it was
John
a
Maritain.
yes, he was a French philosopher who was a contemporary, died in 1973. And I do have a quote here. Mauritian's philosophy is based on the view that metaphysics is prior to epistemology. Being is first apprehended implicitly in sense experience and is known in two ways. First, being is known reflexively by abstraction from sense experience. One experiences a particular being, a cup, a dog, etc., and through reflection, or bending back on the judgment, says, this is a dog, or this is a cup.
Or an elephant.
And one recognizes the object in question as existence. Second, in light of attaining being reflexively through apprehension of sense experience, one may arrive at what Mauritian calls an intuition of being. For Mauritian at this point, this is a point of departure for metaphysics. Without the intuition of being, one cannot be a metaphysician at all. The intuition of being involves rising to the apprehension of ens secundum quod es ens, being insofar as it is a being. In existence, or the existent, he explains, it is being attained or perceived at the summit of the abstraction or intellectual. This is why this book is so hard.
That's such heavy
It
philosophical
is. You're giving us the
jargon.
flavor of
But-
it.
but it's-
what's your takeaway so far? Like, would you say
So-
that the author is making his argument well or not?
He is making his argument well. He is saying, hold the phone here, to say there is no Catholic influence is flat wrong, and that Tolkien had a Summa Theologica on his desk
Okay.
that,
So, and I'm
that
assuming-
Christopher ignored
Okay.
in his writing of
Right.
stuff.
Would you say then that his point's not simply that, for example, you would look at, I don't know, the presence of, the female Valar and, like Varda, for example, and draw links maybe with Mary, but things much deeper on a structural scale.
Correct.
The way in which
It's not-
he's approaching it,
Yeah.
because he's a medievalist, right? I mean, like Tolkien, if anybody, he
Right.
really saw things
Yeah.
through an early medieval mindset.
Yeah. And so here is a great medieval author, St. Thomas of Aquinas.
Right.
And to not be influenced by that writing as well, knowing that Tolkien had read St. Thomas Aquinas, is balderdash in
It's
this
interesting.
author's opinion.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I guess I have to look back at Summa again, because when I tried reading it
I
in
have
college,
not read it, for the record.
It is,
and it makes me want to
it's
read
very it's very
Yeah.
difficult to get through. But then I was 20 years old, so
Yeah.
Well, it's like Silmarillion, takes a few reads.
Well, yes.
You were
First
ambitious.
time stabbing at it 5th, 6th grade, I struggled
Brian,
with
are you
that.
saying
so
that was an age ago?
it inspires me to want to read up,
Right.
if you will,
To understand
back-
more of the
back
references.
into the sources.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, can I just add one quick thing to this?
Sure.
There's a really fascinating discussion of the flame imperishable,
Yes.
that
correct.
concept itself, in the Prancing Pony podcast. The two guys who do their talking, they start with the Silmarillion, and I really recommend the podcast to all of you. They started with the Silmarillion, and then they went through the Hobbit chapter by chapter, and now they're in the Lord of the Rings. I think they're in the Two Towers right now. But if you go back to the one of their first 10 or 20 podcasts, they talk about the flame imperishable and how that's different from what Gandalf says when he's on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Because he said,
see.
wielder of the flame of Anor.
The sun.
Mhm.
Anor was
Yes.
the sun.
Yes,
Right.
and the ring he's wearing is which one?
Narya?
Narya, thank you.
Yeah.
It's the ring of fire. No comments on Johnny Cash this time, Chris. And but he's wearing this ring, and he references something else. He calls it not the not the flame imperishable, but
The secret fire,
the secret fire.
which is in here as well.
Interesting,
Yes.
because what they think is that those are two separate things, and it has to do with Roa and Fea.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this before with
Roa,
elvish
Fea,
terms of
yeah,
physical Roa, Fea,
Heart and
Yeah,
spirit.
so
yeah.
he's talking about the physical
Okay.
and metaphysical.
So do you think
yes.
that the flame imperishable, is that like kind of a metaphor for God's power in us?
I don't know if
Well,
that would be
Iluvatar
directly.
wasn't Iluvatar
Um,
described as a flame,
It's
no, not exactly.
or
he-
was that Arda?
He seems to indicate
yeah, it's
here
an
that
argument.
it is the
Creative.
the creative work, the
Okay.
ability to create is part, and the whole sub-creation argument is part of this whole
Well, right,
argument.
right,
on
because it's
flame
all about the
imperishable.
secondary world and
Yes.
the subcreator. I do think that there is something that's mentioned about, so that the flame imperishable is, in a sense, what's sustaining. It's part of that, of Arda, and well, even maybe of Ea, because
right,
Ea
the
is like the
overall,
whole star
that which
system,
is, yeah,
that
all
which
of the
is.
universe. Yeah.
So it's being, but I think it's specifically somewhere in the Silmarillion. It says in the Anolindale, or soon afterwards in the Valaquenta, it says something about that the imperishable flame was placed within Arda. Is that what it says?
You want the quote?
Yes, please.
And I will send forth into the void the flame imperishable. Now, it's interesting that he says void there.
And that does not mean space.
And it shall be at the heart of the world.
Right.
And the world shall be. And those of you that will... This doesn't make sense. And those of you that may go down into
And those
it.
of you that will
That talking
may
about
go
the-
down into it.
the
Yeah, there
Valor.
should be a comma there.
Yeah.
but-
Okay, got it. There isn't a comma here.
Yeah.
And suddenly the Einar saw afar off a light, as it were a cloud, with a living heart of flame, and they knew that this was no vision only, but that Iluvatar had made a new thing,
Okay, there you go.
Ea, the world that is.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. So Ea is related to it, but Ea is the creative act of Iluvatar by which the imperishable flame is, as it were, nestled at the heart of the world.
mhm.
And but the secret fire is that what's within each person? Or is the flame imperishable within elves and men? The two children of Iluvatar.
So the secret fire seems
Like
to
Fea.
be
How does Fea relate to that?
the effects of the flame
Okay.
imperishable
Okay.
upon the sub-creators.
Okay.
Well, what
Wow.
was the whole statement about Fëanor making the Fëanor making the Silmarils? Didn't they say his fire was so great that didn't his mother die from giving birth to
Yeah,
him?
yeah.
Something
And
along
he
those
put hit.
lines.
Well, that was much of Tolkien's concept that when you did things like magics and such, you expended your own essence into it, like
always
the
a
ring
cost.
for Sauron,
Yeah.
etc. So there wasn't even Melkor.
Yeah.
He talked about Melkor because he put so much into the planet, into the making of Arda, of Endor and everything. Melkor did.
Oh.
Melkor put so much of his essence in the battle to shape it.
Oh, right.
It
because
weakened
he's trying to
him
ruin
and
it.
it bound him to the physical realm because so much of his own essence was put into there. And Sauron did the same thing with the rings and such. But so that's that that you imbue things with your own energy, if you will, your own spirit.
Well,
That was an
technically,
ongoing theme.
but the son was born of two things. There was a Valar that was in charge
Right.
of the fruit
Right.
that was
Taken
born
from
of the tree.
Yes, from the
So,
Lowland.
so you might say like it might be a secondary reflection of the imperishable fire because it came. If you think about it, it came from the original
Right. It's a fruit.
light
Yes.
source.
Well, and notice it's the imperishable flame, as opposed to the two
Yes.
trees, which are perishable.
Yes.
Or the sun, which is perishable.
And so the biblical image of Moses seeing the burning bush that doesn't...
It's an imperishable flame.
Yeah.
Right.
And
It's not quenchable.
And then how it affected Moses.
Right.
And that's kind of
in there
where he goes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for that book. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think
I'm only
listening,
85 pages through.
When
so.
you finish the book, please do give us another update on that, because I think it might be easier for us to read your review than to read the book itself.
Yeah, it is.
You're doing the labor.
It is.
We'll
it
cheerfully
is not
benefit
an
from
easy
it.
book, but that's
Do you have
okay.
a blog that you write about this stuff on, or you have a blog that you write?
I have been thinking about starting up a blog again,
What's a blog?
and I have not yet.
A web log. It's the new thing.
Well, it's been around for quite a while.
It's the new,
I'm teasing
it's
it.
the new
So
old
hi.
thing.
It's been around for quite a while.
To me, it always sounds like the word block, but only with a goog on
I
the
got a
end.
writer's blog.
I got a blog. It's
No,
like those shaped
It used to
deals.
be block, but they changed it to blog when Google took over the copyright.
Oh, that reminds me. There is a university now that I believe is trying to copyright. It's Ohio State? No, somewhere. They're trying to copyright the word "the."
You mean trademark it?
Trademark on that.
The word "the"?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
So they can profit, obviously.
Look it up.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the Silmarillion. We talked about... Well, we can't get away from the Silmarillion, can we? The flame imperishable.
You can't get away if you're going to talk about Tolkien.
Yes.
You're not going to get away from the Silmarillion.
Right. Hawk, is there anything that you wanted to mention or update us on? Or
Tolkien Moot?
Yeah.
Tolkien Moot is 2 months away. And the theme is the fall of Gondolin, Silmarillion, and a Sword of Worth, Silmarillion. And so Brian and I are working on and off feverishly on preparing the adventure. The way we do Tolkien Moot is we write... So we've experimented different ways, and from feedback from all the participants, the way they like the most is when everybody's playing the same adventure at all the different tables. Even though they have a different game master and a different game system, they want to be playing the same story, so they all feel connected in the convention. They can all share stories and everything. So we've experimented with a lot of other different ways, and that's the way everybody's liked the most. Over now, it'll be 15 years. This will be our 15th year doing Tolkien Moot.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Remember that long?
Yeah. It's this is Tolkien Moot 15 coming up. Yeah.
Why haven't I heard of this?
So it was
I like so many of my other projects, nobody's heard of.
It was MERPCon.
It was MERPCon for 5 years, and then after the 5th year, we officially changed it to Tolkien Moot because it was more descriptive.
The numbers kept going up.
Yeah,
so the
and
first
then
5 are, I think, MERPCon.
so we used to host it at like actual places, and then it because I was self-funding. I've always been self-funding it, and it was costing me thousands of dollars a convention, and I got near $10,000 the last one, and I just couldn't maintain that because we can't. The reason why it's that way, I don't dare charge for fear of having to deal with the licensing. Right, the moment we charge for anything,
the estate comes after
the
us.
estate comes after us, or more likely the enterprise.
Yeah, the enterprise will come after us.
estate not going to worry so much.
No, they're not gonna
So we just have to keep running it for free, and the cheapest way to do it has been at my house. And we try to host up to about 6 or 7 game tables. We have a special author, usually some published author, Michael Martinez and others. We've had Elvish singers. We've had different special guests.
Wow.
We've had people come as far as Germany.
We had to pull them in pan-dimensional.
I propose that we make force Tolkien
Transdimensional.
Enterprises
Okay.
to change from Enterprise to Empire, the Tolkien Empire, because
It just should be Mordorian Enterprises or something. Sauron Enterprises.
Yes.
Well, anyway, so this will be our 15th year. Now, we are hoping in coming years that we can expand it again. It used to be 3 days long, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that people would travel from all over the world to participate.
But that's only one day?
Now, it's 1 day for now, and it's at my house, so that we can afford to keep doing it. So it's, yes, here at this house. I break all the rooms, turn into game rooms. This becomes our main area for, we have an audience. We can fit about 30, 40 people. It's a mini con, right? We don't have more than 30 people at our peak, 30-something people. Yeah, I've got a bunch of other rooms. I've got eight bedrooms in this house. So yeah, it's fine. So we break off when we're doing the game sessions. Everybody's playing in a different room. We've got rooms up there. We have the trailer, it's a game room. The bus is a game room. We've now got enough game rooms for 10 tables we could potentially do. We just and with our volunteer staff growing, maybe someday we'll get to that. But for now, it's still at my house, and someday we hope to have it back to 3 days and out in a public venue. But until we can afford to do that, this is the cheapest way. And this way, it only costs me hundreds of dollars rather than thousands of dollars to host it. And we've been doing it potluck instead of me trying to provide all the food. Everybody brings a little something.
It's a great event.
So it's a community thing.
Yeah. Community thing.
It's a lot of fun.
We have a morning session for role playing.
We start early.
Yep, and then we're done for lunch. We eat lunch.
And then we do Tolkien Society.
We do a Tolkien Society meeting, and then we go from like around 2 or 3 until about 6.
More gaming.
And that's the second session.
And
then
dinner
we
break.
for a little dinner, and then we have third session, which is the evening.
And then for the hardcore ones, they do a late night session or a day before, day after. But excuse me, but we don't do that as often as we used to. But hopefully someday we'll have it back to 3 days. We have talked about incorporating as a nonprofit. That requires more overhead. We talked about merging with RPG Research. That was voted out. Or the RPG Research board decided that was too much potential liability in case Tolkien Enterprises ever did go after us. RPG Research didn't want to take that risk.
Now that they've discovered there's money in it, it's more.
Right, yeah. Ever since the Peter Jackson films, they've become much more draconian. So we're kind of in this weird limbo. That's why it's not very large, even though it's significant what we do.
Well, and they keep editing your internet browsing possibilities, right? Don't your websites? Didn't they go out there and delete a bunch of links and stuff like that? So
there was one time that Tolkien Enterprises went after Merp.com.
Sorry, I just think of him as a rebel.
Well, they were claiming infringement because we linked to servers that had maps to download. And we had a big legal battle with them, and Electronic Frontier Foundation helped us, and out of the dozens of sites that were shut down and have never come back since then, I was the only one to survive because we fought back. And out of the thousands of links and pages that we had to remove like 14 or something. It was not very many. But they tried to shut the whole site down, but because the way we set things up, they couldn't. We were able to stay standing. Anyway, so that is just 2 months away. That's October 19th. And you can RSVP at tolkienmoot.org. It is a free event, but we do ask that everybody try to contribute through potluck type approach. And then it's a long day. We open the doors around 7:30 a.m. and we try to get things rolling by 8 a.m. and it runs till about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And we allow time for socializing in between, as well as the gameplay and the scholarly stuff. And then usually Michael Martinez remotes in and helps. Not always, but we usually have somebody. Michael Martinez has done hundreds and hundreds of essays on Tolkien, and we have several of his books and such. We've had other special guests over time as well. Now, normally it's on July, but because of marriage and honeymoon and everything, we bumped it to October. So that's what's going on there. And then, but I'd say let's go ahead and get going with some reading of some of Gondolin.
I think so.
Because that is the theme for this year's Tolkien Moot. You're going to get to roleplay through the Fall of Gondolin.
Really? Okay.
You're first going to quest for a Sword of Worth, and then be somehow involved in the Fall of Gondolin.
It's kind of like role playing the sinking of the Titanic.
A bit.
You got a vague idea what's going to happen.
You know some of the key historical things that are going to happen. What your level of involvement is completely unknown.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
There will be lots of premonition. All right.
I can't sleep.
Let's see. Where is my copy of Larvo? Where's my...
I was not here.
Page 76, this was the fashion.
Looks like it's on a second shelf. There you go.
76. Okay.
76?
I have some catch-up to do.
Oh, I've got an 84. Yeah, because we did read a little bit, right? I've got 84 bookmarked.
Okay, that must be where we are then.
Well, then I have some catch-up to do. Okay,
all right.
That's good.
Shall I go ahead and start here? Or?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So just the main thing that you would have missed is that when the attack happened, that Maeglin went to grab Idril, the king's daughter, and her son Earendel, and was trying to. He was going to throw Earendel off the cliff, and so he wanted him off the wall, and he was going to make Idril watch, and so he's struggling with them when Tuor is able to come back and rescue them, and he breaks Myglin's arm and throws him off the wall, which is ironically what his father Eol, the Dark Elf, that was the same fate that he faced.
There are some recurring themes because they're based on like ancient Greek literature concepts.
Like Myglin basically sold out his own people, right?
Yeah.
Because
and Kalervo.
The king is his uncle.
Yes.
You know, the king King Turgon is his uncle, and so now his people are the people of the mole, that like these elves that followed Myglin. So anyway, okay. We're on 84.
Then Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, gathered all his demons that were about the city and ordered them thus. A number made for the folk of the Hammer and gave before them. But the great company, rushing upon the flank, contrived to get to their backs, higher upon the coils of the drakes and nearer to the gates, so that Rog might not win back save with great slaughter among his folk. But Rog, seeing this, essayed not to win back as was hoped, but with all his folk fell on those whose part was to give before him. And they fled before him, now of dire need rather than of craft. Down the plain were they harried, and their shrieks rent the airs of Tumlodden. Then that house of the Hammer fared about smiting and hewing the astonied band of Melko till they were hemmed at the last by an overwhelming force of the orcs and the Balrogs, and a fire drake was loosed upon them. There did they perish about Rog, hewing to the last till iron and flame overcame them, and it is yet sung that each man of the Hammer of Wrath took the lives of 7 foemen to pay for his own. Then did dread fall more heavily still upon the Gondolthlim at the death of Rog and the loss of his battalion. And they gave back further yet into the city, and Penlod perished there in a lane with his back to the wall, and about him many of the men of the Pillar and many of the Tower of Snow. Now therefore Melko's goblins held all the gate and a great part of the walls on either side, whence numbers of the Swallow and those of the Rainbow were thrust to doom. But within the city they had won a great space, reaching nigh to the centre, even to the place of the well that adjoined the square of the palace. Yet about those ways and around the gate their dead were piled in uncounted heaps, and they halted therefore and took counsel, seeing that for the valour of the Gondolthlim they had lost many more than they had hoped, and far more than those defenders. Fearful too they were for that slaughter Rog had done amid the Balrogs. Because of those demons they had great courage and confidence of heart. Now then, the plan that they made was to hold what they had won, while those serpents of bronze and with great feet for trampling climbed slowly over those of iron, and reaching the walls there opened a breach wherethrough the Balrogs might ride upon the dragons of flame. Yet they knew this must be done with speed, for the heats of those drakes lasted not forever, and might only be plenished from the wells of fire that Melko had made in the fastness of his own land. That's an interesting twist. But even as their messengers were sped, they heard a sweet music that was played amid the host of the Gondolthlim, and they feared that it might mean what it might mean. And lo, there came Ecthelion and the people of the fountain, whom Turgon now had held in reserve, for he watched the most of that affray from the heights of his tower. Now marched these folk to a great plain of their flutes, and the crystal and silver of their array was most lovely to see amid the red light of the fires and the blackness of the ruins.
So the question about the dragons.
Yeah, that's an interesting twist.
For years, I thought the dragons didn't have just belch flame all the time. But
yeah, no, this is one variant, remember, but that's an interesting variant.
This is also an early prototype version
yeah.
of dragons, they don't have any wings. They're
Right,
more
these are
like
the drakes.
Chinese.
These are the drake type.
They're
Yeah.
more like Chinese dragons.
Well, and even from the beginning, I think he was consistent in this, is that all the way through, not all dragons breathe fire. You know,
Right.
cold drakes, for example.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So you have other sorts of dragons that do not breathe fire.
Is that what Americans drink? Cold drinks? Is that the reason why we're not British enough?
I don't know. You want? Did you want to take a turn?
Sure, yeah.
And then the music. Da, 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
The Ride of the Valkyrie.
He wasn't saying trumpets and that. That'd be more Melkor.
I kind of imagine this a little bit more like like you think, oh, how can a flute be? You know, how can that be intimidating? The fife and drum. Of the approach of
Right.
the soldiers in the Revolutionary War.
Right, right,
Think
yeah.
like that.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yes.
marching unto war.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, right
Yep.
here? Okay. Then on a sudden their music ceased, and Ecthelion of the fair voice shouted for the drawing of swords, and before the orcs might foresee his onslaught, the flashing of those pale blades was among them. It is said that Ecthelion's folk there slew more of the goblins than fell ever in all the battles of the Eldalier with that race, and that his name is a terror among them to this latest day, and a war cry to the Eldar. Now 'tis that Tuor and the men of the wing fare into the fight and range themselves beside Ecthelion and those of the fountain, and the twain strike mighty blows and ward each many a thrust from the other, and harry the orcs so they win back almost to the gate. But there behold a quaking and a trampling, for the dragons labor mightily at beating a path of Amanguareth and at casting down the walls of the city, and already there is a gap therein, and a confusion of masonry, where the ward towers have fallen in ruin. Bands of the Swallow and of the Arch of Heaven there fight bitterly amid the wreck, or contest the walls to east and were with the foe. But even as Tuor comes nigh driving through the orcs, one of those brazen snakes heaves against the western wall, and a great mass of it shakes and falls, and behind comes a creature of fire and Balrogs among it. Flames gust from the jaws of that worm, and folk wither before it, and the wings of the helm of Tuor are blackened, but he stands and gathers about him his guard and all the arch and swallow he can find, whereas on the right Ecthelion rallies the men of the Fountain of the South. Now the orcs again take heart from the coming of the drakes, and they mingle with the Balrogs that pour down the breach, about the breach, and they assail the Gondolin grievously. There Tuor slew Othrod, the lord of the orcs, cleaving his helm, and Balkmeg he hewed another, and Lug he smote with his axe. His limbs were cut from beneath him at the knee. But Ecthelion shore threw two captains of the goblin at a sweep, and cleft the head of Orquabal, their chiefest captain, to his teeth. And by reason of the great dotiness of those two lords, they came even unto the Balrogs. Of those demons of power, Ecthelion slew three, for the brightness of his sword cleft the iron of them, and did hurt to their fire, and they writhed. Yet of the leap of that axe Dramborleg that was swung by the hand of Tuor were they still more afraid, for it sang like the rush of eagle's wings in the air, and took death as it fell, and 5 of them went down before it.
I'm just curious, but wasn't there something about the cold bite of iron in The Lord of the Rings?
Yes.
To say that, so when it says here that the fire of the
Iron Biter?
the iron
The bronze crawled over iron.
hurt the Balrogs?
Well,
Biter and Beecher.
medieval myth had iron as being raw
Against
iron,
Fae and
not
such.
steel,
Yeah.
being prescient to things of Fae.
Yep.
Yep.
Also, the Balrogs, you'll notice here that Tolkien, as I think we've mentioned before, he ended up changing his mind about the size and the dread and the majesty of Balrogs, so that where you have in
Right. These were actually more like foot soldiers.
Yeah.
In the early versions.
Yeah.
Later they
In one of the
become-
letters,
dragons.
Yeah.
in one of the letters, he says, "Maybe I shouldn't have set the kill ratio so high."
Probably didn't say it quite that
I
way.
think you're embellishing a little
I
bit.
think what
Embellishing.
But I think what he did want to get across, though, was the prowess and the courage of the Gondolin in fighting, and especially Ecthelion.
He slew.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
We were talking about fife and drum and such.
back then I would stir your blood.
What about bagpipes? They were playing those up to.
He didn't mention bagpipes in this, so.
They were playing those up to.
It was psychological warfare, right? In music.
Yep. Totally.
Still, you have to admit that Ecthelion killing 3 Balrogs is pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah, that'll... Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How many Balrogs have you?
And it tells you, again, because it's always about the decline, about just how powerful the old Noldor and such were. Right, compared that they could do that. Yeah.
So does the fact
of Amon, you know, they were of Amon.
So does the fact that they were so courageous in fighting increase the tragedy of the
yeah. Well, certainly because they'll never be their like again, because each incarnation is weaker than the one before.
And it's not only true of the people, but also the city, because the creation of. I mean, you have a city that's basically been there for like 1,000 years, and during this whole time, Gondolin is recreating in Middle Earth something like
of Amon.
It's like
with a
snapshot
of heaven.
To it. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and by the way, you know how we wondered whether or not it was truly trees, or whether it mentioned that there were just like the likenesses of the trees, and they are. There is a gold and silver tree in Gondolin.
Yeah, it's like a copy or something?
It's a descendant. Of the tree that was planted.
How is that even possible?
I mean, I know not of the 2 trees, but remember that Yavanna created. They gave tree, just the white tree. They gave a white tree to.
Numori?
No, well, yes,
that was later.
But it was like they gave one to the elves at Avalone in that island,
right
outside of Eleanor, right next to the shore.
Oh, okay.
And then the descendant of that was Galathilion, I think. And then the next one was given to the first white tree of Numenor. But apparently, there's these 2 trees that, I don't know. It's possible that they were some other.
Could
descendant.
just be Tolkien was playing with the concept.
Yeah, that too. Called suspending your disbelief, Richard.
What?
I don't have any suspension of disbelief.
Okay, carry on,
I believe
guys.
everything that's written here.
Especially on the internet.
This is a historical epic.
Yes, exactly.
Stick that Balrog in your eye.
Ooh, that burns.
But so it is that few cannot fight always against the many, and Ecthelion's left arm got a sore rent from the whip of a Balrog's, and his shield fell to earth, even as that dragon of fire drew nigh amid the ruin of the walls. Then Ecthelion must lean on Tuor, and Tuor might not leave him, though the very feet of the trampling beast were upon them, and they were like to be overborne. But Tuor hewed at a foot of the creature, so that flame spouted forth, and the serpent screamed, lashing with its tail, and many of both orcs and Nodoli got their death therefrom.
So he gave him a hangnail and it burst into flame?
Yep. Now Tuor gathered his might and lifted Ecthelion. Amid a remnant of the folk got there under and escaped the drake, yet dire was the killing of men that beast had wrought, and the Gondolithum were sorely shaken. Thus it was that Tuor, son of Peleg, gave before the foe, fighting as he yielded ground, and bore from the battle at Ecthelion of the Fountain. But the drakes and the foemen held half of the city, and all of the north of it. Thence marauding bands fared about the streets, and did much ransacking, or slew the dark men and women and children, and many, if occasion let, they bound and led back, and flung into the iron chambers amid the dragons of iron, that they might drag them afterwards to be the thralls of Melko. Now Tuor reached the square of the Folkwell by a way entering from the north, and found there Galdor denying the western entry of the Arch of Inway to a horde of the goblins. But about him was now but a few of those men of the tree. There did Galdor become the salvation of Tuor, for he fell behind his men, stumbling beneath Ecthelion over a body that lay in the dark, and the orcs had taken them both, but for a sudden rush of the champion and the dint of his club. There were the scatterlanes of the guard of the wing, and the houses of the tree and the fountain, and of the swallow and the arch, welded to a good battalion, and by the counsel of Tuor they gave way out of that place of the well, seeing that the square of the king that lay next was the most more defensible. Now that place had aforetime contained many beautiful trees, both oak and poplar, about a great well of vast depth, and great purity of water. Yet at that hour it was full of the riot and ugliness of the hideous people of Melko, and those waters were polluted with their carcasses.
You know, it's interesting that what you were saying earlier about the taste of heaven, you know, it's interesting. Tolkien is saying, essentially, like, these guys had isolated themselves from the world, withdrew, and tried to recreate, and ultimately, the darkness took them as well. And
part of it was, since they isolated themselves rather than rallying together, one by one they were taken down, which was exactly as was hoped. Divide and conquer.
But there's this idea. I guess you could call it a theological idea about wandering in the world. This idea that nothing is fully, we're not fully at home in any way. I mean, that would be the Catholic idea.
Well, but also the Noldor were exiles, weren't they? They were exiles of Valinor, and so ultimately, by trying to create Gondolin, even though it was beautiful, it was kind of a failed project, because you're trying to create the West in Middle Earth instead of going back.
Right. Most of the inhabitants of Gondolin were escaped prisoners of Melkor.
In a way, the world was tainted in such a way that, and the exile of the elves was such that, even though they, for a moment, it was suppressed, maybe you might say, the darkness did end up infiltrating and destroying the very thing that they were
trying to do, to stay away from everything. It was. That's part of the tragedy, though, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't feel really sorry for the sons of Feanor.
Yeah. No, they were corrupt.
But I feel sorry for Turgon, because he's like, well, we're over here in Middle Earth, and clearly the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, this is not our future. We need to preserve what we have. In a sense, you could make a really good argument for how that is very much like what Galadriel and Celeborn seek to do in Lothlorien, right? And the only way they're able to keep that for a while, as this kind of retreat from the world, this as it were, island in time, is because she's wearing one of the three elf rings.
Yeah, because they're trying to stave off entropy.
Yeah. Well, we're almost to 3, so does anybody else want to read before we finish here?
Corey volunteer for trivia?
Oh, okay.
Is that okay, Chris?
Where are we at?
88.
Thus comes the last
bottom paragraph.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. Thus comes the last stout gathering of those defenders in the square of the palace of Turgon. Among them are many wounded and fainting, and Tuor is wearied for the labors of the night and the weight of Ecthelion, who is in a deadly swoon. Even as he led the battalion in by the road of arches from the northwest, and they had much ado to prevent any foe getting behind their backs, a noise arose at the eastward of the square, and lo, Glorfindel is driven in with the last of the men of the Golden Flower. Now these had sustained a terrible conflict in the great market to the east of the city, where a force of orcs led by Balrogs came at them unawares as they marched by a circuitous way to the fight about the gate. This they did to surprise the foe upon his left flank, but were themselves
Ambuscaded. That means ambushed.
Ooh, boy, ambuscaded. I've never heard it.
There's a $10 word.
Yeah, there you go.
$60 word.
I want $10 per letter.
You're gonna start writing these words behind paintings in the hotels. They're fought there bitterly for hours till a fire drake new come from the breach overwhelmed them, and Glorfindel cut his way out very, very hardly and with few men. But that place with its stores and its goodly things of fine workmanship was a waste of flames. The story tells that Turgon had sent the men of the harp to their aid because of the urgency of the messengers from Glorfindel. But Salgant?
Yep.
Concealed this bidding from them, saying they were to garrison the square of the lesser market to the south where he dwelt, and they fretted thereat. Now, however, they break from Salgant and were come before the king's hall, and that was very timely, for a triumphant press of foemen was at Glorfindel's heels. On these the men of the harp, unbidden, fell with great eagerness, and utterly redeemed the cravenhood of their lord, driving the enemy back into the market, and being leaderless, fared even over wrathfully, so that many of them were trapped in the flames, or sank beneath the breath of the serpent that reveled there.
We'll leave that right there.
Oh, no. Just one more page.
One more?
Yes.
All right.
Tuor now drank of the great fountain and was refreshed, and loosening Thelion's helm gave him to drink, splashing his face that his swoon left him. Now those lords Tuor and Glorfindel clear the square and withdraw all the men they may from the entrances and bar them with barriers, save as yet on the south. Even from that region comes now Egelmoth. He had charge of the engines on the wall, but long since deeming matters to call rather for hand-strokes about the streets than shooting upon the battlements, he gathered some of the arch and of the swallow about him and cast away his bow. Then did they fare about the city dealing good blows whenever they fell in with bands of the enemy. Thereby he rescued many bands of captives, and gathered no few wandering and driven men, and so got to the king's square with hard fighting. And men were fain to greet him, for they had feared him dead. Now are all the women and children that had gathered there, or been brought in by Egelmoth, stowed in the king's halls, and the ranks of the houses made ready for the last. In that host of survivors are some, be it however few, of all the kindreds, save of the Hammer of Wrath alone, and the king's house is as yet untouched, nor is this any shame, for their part was ever to bide fresh to the last and defend the king. But now the men of Melko have assembled their forces, and 7 dragons of fire have come with orcs about them, and Balrogs upon them, down all the ways, from north, east, and west, seeking the square of the king. Then there was carnage at the barriers, and Egelmoth and Tuor went from place to place of the defence. But Ecthelion lay by the fountain, and that stand was the most stubborn, valiant, that is remembered in all the songs or in any tale. Yet at long last a drake bursts the barrier to the north, and there had once been the issue of the Valley of Roses, and a fair place to see or to walk in, but now there is but a lane of blackness, and it is filled with noise. Tuor stood then in the way of that beast, but was sundered from Egelmoth, and they pressed him backward even to the centre of the square nigh the fountain. There he became weary from the strangling heat, and was beaten down by a great demon, even Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, son of Melko. But lo, Ecthelion, whose face was of the pallor of grey steel, and whose shield arm hung limp at his side, strode above him as he fell, and that gnome drove at the demon, yet did not give him his death, getting rather a wound to his sword arm, that his weapon left his grasp. Then leapt Ecthelion, lord of the fountain, fairest of the Noldoli, full at Gothmog, even as he raised his whip, and his helm that had a spike upon it he drove into that evil breast, and he twined his legs about his foeman's thighs, and the Balrog yelled and fell forward, but those 2 dropped into the basin of the king's fountain, which was very deep. There found that creature his bane, and Ecthelion sank steel-laden into the depths, and so perished the lord of the fountain after fiery battle in cool waters.
Hark, doth I hear the birds chirping in my ear? Alas, is it daybreak already?
So that gives you kind of some of the source material of Gandalf the White being created. Yes.
by Illuvatar.
Well, you know what's interesting is every time they say blows, I don't know why, but I'm thinking
When
like
he fought
fisticuffs.
Balrog.
Like
Great.
Fisticuffs?
you know,
Pugilism.
they're out there
It
with
was
the
a mighty
with their-
pugilistic battle.
with a gauntlet, you know, punching Gothmog in the
Ding,
face.
third ring with Gothmog and Aphelion. Who will that
All right. Well, any last comments? Sound like Chris has got something.
At least
What's
he
that?
hit-
You guys, we should remember we're still in the air, so one at a time, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Just what were you guys saying?
Oh, we were just admiring the artwork on the.
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah. Is that by Howe
Alan Lee.
or Lee?
I
Alan
think.
Lee. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Lee always did the really good big picture, kind of big scenes, and Howe is the detail guy.
Now you may not be aware, we have a magazine as well called Other Minds Magazine.
Oh yeah, I think I read about
So
that.
you
Is
can
it
check it
online?
out. It's online. Issue 22 is in the works right now.
Okay.
So it goes all the way back, and it's interrelated between gaming and scholarly discussion. It's a mixture of both.
Drink. At least it wasn't.
And we've been putting out issues since 2005, and we have permission from these artists to use their artwork because it's a non-profit for free zine. And so Thomas Lewinsky is the editor. I'm the founder. He's an original editor. What's that?
Research,
I was teasing him. Research, not plagiarism.
not plagiarism.
Yes.
But thankfully, they gave their.
They gave explicit permission for us to use their artwork and such
because they're great like
in the
that.
zine. They are. So, so a lot of these things you may also want to check out at omzine.org, omzine.org. But anyway, remember, just 2 months away from Tolkien Moot. Go ahead and RSVP. The sites were down this morning, but I hurried and fixed them. Everything broke while I was away. And we'll be back again. Well, let's see, actually. This could be a problem because I'm going to be gone at ATRA I'll be in Reno from the 13th through the 17th.
I can host next.
Can you run it?
I can do it because
you want to do
it's-
it here and just give you the door code and you run it here?
I could do.
That's
I
probably
don't.
the easiest.
The thing is that I don't know how to run all the camera work.
You don't have to.
Well, then we might just have it. I mean, well,
I just
if you
because
want
people
it to be
know
here.
it's here.
Okay.
It's just a way
Sure.
to keep it consistent.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Can we do it in
I
your
might bring
basement?
some yummies because
that'd
it'll
be
be
great.
it'll be the 21st. So
Yes.
the next day
Yep.
is Frodo and Bilbo's birthday.
Yes.
Oh wait, it's the 21st. Oh, never
Yeah.
mind. I will be here.
You
Never
will be
mind. I will be here because I'll be gone. We'll be on the road the 11th or 12th at ATRA in Reno, 14th through 17th.
I think the idea
We'll
was
be
that
back
you'd
like
be
the
back,
day
and
or
you just
two
would
before.
be like,
I'll be tired,
it
but I'll
would-
be here.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be here.
Not
Oh, just like
it
travel.
wouldn't work for
Oh,
a Tolkien moot, but it would work for Tolkien Society.
Right. Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It'll be good to go.
Okay, so our next meeting is on
Thank
the 21st of September
21st September.
here.
What was your
Third Saturday.
question?
Oh, how do you get all these opportunities to like travel and stuff? You seem like a well-traveled.
I have a lot going on between RPG research, RPG therapeutics,
Fingers,
ASL study group,
eyes,
2600.
spinning on many plates.
Yes, 2600 group, ASL group,
It's-
Dots
And it's the degree also
RPG.
that his career that he's setting up has to do with therapeutics.
Well, I'm building a whole industry of therapeutic role playing
scratch.
gaming
Yeah.
from scratch. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
so I've
so-
been speaking at conventions and conferences every chance I get, and on talk shows and live broadcasts and such. So.
Yeah.
That's why it's happening. So we've been asked to speak. We've been asked to deliver an entire day workshop for therapeutic recreation professionals, and it's $700 a ticket. The conference is in Reno, September 14th through 17th, for the American Therapeutic Recreation Association. It's also international. There'll be over 900 professionals there, and we submitted 3 proposals. They liked all 3 and asked us to do an entire day workshop on the opening day of the conference on Saturday. So from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., we will be teaching these therapeutic recreation professionals all about role-playing games and how to integrate them into their profession, how to work with different populations and do different adaptations, and how to get training and certification from our organization so they can get better at it.
Out
So
of
that's
curiosity, how much of that percentage of that
we don't.
ticket
We get
okay.
very little. We get.
do they
know,
give you an honorarium or something?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to pay. We'll get reimbursed on our tickets that we already paid for, and a little bit more. But they've also asked us to do a bunch of webinars as well, and we get paid a little bit for that too. But it's much more about the exposure and the connections and such. So, and it'll be John, Danielle, and I are all 3 taking the RPG bus, the RPG trailer, and the RPG SUV, the whole convoy down And then we'll be there all 4 days, and then we have to drive back. And the whole time I'm hoping the engine on the bus doesn't explode, because it has a rod knock ever since the RPG tour September, October.
You have to wear SPF 30 for the exposure that you
Yeah.
get?
Not yet. So
it's just
that's why that's going on. Now, last month a lot of it too is because I got married. It was a honeymoon and everything too. So
Oh, yeah.
that's what really
You actually
shook
put that
things up.
first.
Yeah, and then Gen Con suddenly fell into our laps because of this documentary that we're advisors for on role-playing games in prison. And so we were invited out to Gen Con to be talk about
So,
that.
yeah, so you're serving underserved populations to some extent?
We work with autism spectrum, brain injuries, at-risk youth, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, wide. If you go to rpgresearch.com, you can learn all about it.
Yeah.
Or I can give you brochures. I got brochures upstairs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't know you didn't know.
Well, I knew some, but...
Okay. Yeah, I'll get you those brochures. You can learn a bit about it.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot more when he does the mind meld on you.
Or just the Matrix spike.
No!
I know Kung Fu.
Brian, if he does the mind meld, he has to buy him dinner first.
All right. Well, anyway, we'll be back again next month, third Saturday of every month from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. And the month after that will be Tolkien So make sure you RSVP at tolkien.org. You'll be able to get our meeting notes on tolkienscholars.org. And, of course, you can watch the videos all of the last dozen years or so on youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. Wherever you may be well, and Namarie.
No, yeah.
The Maria.